Hi, it's Dr. Jenn Kennedy. I'm a sexologist and couples therapist. The Pleasure Project podcast is about sex and relationships. So this includes discussions on desire, dysfunction, dissatisfaction, exploration of all things sex related. So sometimes I'll do toy reviews and we'll look at trends, and sometimes I'll also enlist other experts. We'll increase your insight and enhance your pleasure. So tune in. Hi, it's Dr. Jenn. In this episode, I am doing a review of Miranda July's book, All Fours. It's a really good book. I'll tell you that from the outset. I'm going to look at it psychologically. I'm going to break it down, talk about kind of some of the highlights of the book, some of the key points of it, and what I liked about it in particular, and also just kind of from the psychological perspective. So tune in. Hi, welcome back. So we are doing a book review today. So recently, not just one, but two friends of mine asked if I had read a book. And I was intrigued because they know I'm a sex therapist, and they were like, you must read this book, All Fours. And of course, the title is like catchy. What? All Fours? Yeah. And they were like, no, we have to talk about it and you must read it. So on a drive down to LA, I put on the audiobook, and I did not want to get out of the car. It was so good. And it was so good for so many reasons. So we're going to break it all down today. And it's really fun. I think you can read it or you can listen to it. Either way, it's quite compelling. Miranda July is the author. She reads it and it's really good. Her reading it is very good too. So I would say it's worth it. It's interesting because when I got to LA, the friends that I saw there said, oh, that's about menopause. And I was like, no, it's not. But I was only about 2.5 hours into it and it hadn't hit that part yet. So I was like, oh no, it's not about menopause. And then I realized later on, I was like, oh yeah, there is a part that kind of takes a turn and you realize, yeah, it's a woman who's 45. And so she is starting to have some of those pieces come together. And it's hitting some of the lists and it's bringing up conversations, but it's not really about that, I would say. And I say that as a woman who's squarely in perimenopause. So it's interesting. So let me frame it out for you first and just say I really enjoyed this book. It was kind of a surprise. It's not like anything I've read in a while. It is a woman's journey that sort of made me cringe a lot, but also I couldn't stop watching. You know, she plans to take a road trip that goes very different than you would expect. She's trying to kind of prove something to herself and to her husband and to the world, and gets derailed pretty quickly and goes into sort of a detour, a frolic and a detour that she, you know, is of her own making, and really goes into kind of an emotional affair / fantasy with somebody. And you know, it's this, she's 45 and she's in this place in her life of sort of dissatisfaction. And so she's open to it, you know, and she is really curious about what else is out there and what could be possible. And so that's to a lot of daydreaming for her, a lot of fantasy, you know, a lot of risk taking. And so I definitely have seen this with clients of people just sort of wanting to spice things up, wanting to be in a different marriage, wanting to be in a different situation than they're currently in. And so they start to do some risk taking. They start to imagine how easy and how great it would be if they were in a different partnership. And so they start to do some things that, oh gosh, you know, really puts them in a place that might land them in some trouble. But it's sort of, you know, I remember as a kid, my grandmother reading these romance novels and just being sort of intrigued. I'd go visit her in the summers and I would read some of these novels and they just seemed so far-fetched. You know, the female characters, you know, were gone with the wind. They were so like ridiculous. And this character doesn't feel like that. She feels like a girlfriend of mine. Like she feels, you know, like she's cool. She's an artist and she's making references to things I totally understand. And she's in a city that I lived in for many years. And, you know, she guides you down that road and you see how she is where she is. She's raising a non-binary child and she's loves her husband, but she also feels a certain amount of blah. And they live in separate bedrooms, and she likes him, but she's not really that interested in him anymore. And so when she comes upon this other young guy, she feels alive, and she feels curiosity, and she feels that intense need to be wanted and to be relevant. And I think that really pricks this thing that is in our culture too, of invisibility that women experience when they cross over that threshold at, I would say, gosh, 40, 45, certainly 50. When you're that age, suddenly we become really invisible. And it's kind of nice on one hand because we've been objectified so much, but it's also sort of devastating to be so irrelevant suddenly. And so to get attention from anyone is like kind of nice, and also disruptive, of course, in the larger experience. So you see her sort of tying herself in knots in her own fantasy, really, but she is getting some attention from this other person, and the daily routine that she's going through to prepare for any sort of attention and exchange with him is pretty remarkable. It's also the attention to detail and the imagination that the writer put in is pretty incredible. I do wonder how much of it is true and real. I kind of wonder if it's all real. Like, I don't know. It's really fun, actually. I couldn't wait to kind of get back to my car and like play the next part. But it's interesting as she kind of weaves in and out of this, and you just sort of wonder. I wondered, like, the character sort of plugs in and feels these moments of aliveness as is in these moments where she's interacting with this young man. And you hear her sort of talking to her girlfriend about it. Her girlfriend seems to be the voice of reality, of reason, of fairness, of kind of a conscience for her, because she's being quite selfish, and she's being very, at times, almost teenager like in her brain. But she wants to feel relevant, she wants to feel desired, she wants to feel attractive. And she's weaving in and out of practical and the feminine and sort of the responsible, and what role does she play, and then returning home to her husband and to her family, and sort of looking at what has she created, and what does she want, and what still matters. And then as she's renegotiating their relationship and being honest about what has transpired, and the two of them doing that in concert is actually kind of a very modern family version of that. I found that very intriguing and really graceful, actually, the way that they both did that. Her husband in the book, wants to stay engaged in the family structure. And so he also takes a lover. They both take a lover. She takes a different lover, and they stay in parent relationship and do that separately. And what do they get out of that? And it's kind of an interesting construct. And I know that some people definitely do this. I've definitely worked with couples who are having open relationships. They don't typically do it this way, which I think is interesting, and I think really helps the kids. Is this couple stays in the household, and then has their partnerships sort of separately. They do it like one day a week on the outside for stability for the child. But sort of, what does that give you to have that ability? Like, she negotiates to have one day a week outside the house, and he then negotiates to do the same thing, and to be able to sort of have that freedom to go and express, and to be with somebody else, and to move freely out and about, and to not have to report back, and to have that anticipation leading up to that time apart, and to know that it's coming, and to know that you're going to get that time to be somebody else, or to be with, it's kind of interesting. And to still have all the safety and familiarity of the family, of the home that you've built, of the all of that. Meanwhile, she's trying to pursue a relationship with someone else, although really that's very, I give it all away, but it's very projection based. It's a female lover, and I wouldn't say they're terribly intimate. They're not very terribly vulnerable. There's a lot of role based, and in the end that sort of comes clear. We watch her sort of stumble through this, and I like her rawness. I like the author's rawness in she's kind of selfish, and she kind of wants what she wants, but she doesn't have a lot of real attachment to anyone. She doesn't seem to actually, she feels like she should be attached to her husband, or she should be attached to, her lover, but she's really sort of in it for what it represents. I think she's attached to her art, but she's not really attached to any of them. But diagnostically, when I was kind of watching her play out with this whole shenanigans of the road trip and such, I was like, oh gosh, it sort of feels like that. I mean, love addiction. Again, I don't know her. I don't know this character per se, but it sort of has that flavor of like the longing and the fantasy and the excessive like strategizing and the deception and the go to any lengths and the I'll just kind of do whatever I need to do to stay in this, and I'll take whatever I can get to stay in this with you, and I'm going to believe what I need to believe to stay present with you, and I'm going to make you who I need to make you in order to let you love me just enough to keep you here with me in my mind, even if you're not physically here with me in the relationship. And the information has to be so painfully presented for the person, the character, to accept it. It's painful to watch sort of it play out. But I've definitely seen that come into the room with folks that are sort of in that cycle where over and over again they're sort of in like a blur of relationships where there isn't a clear beginning or ending, and then there's this sort of like lots of strategizing and preoccupation and a lot of anxiety about should I stay in the relationship, or what do I need to do to get this person, and then once I'm in it, how do I stay in it, how do I win them, how do I keep them, how do I please them, how do I make them love me? And then they're too much. I feel suffocated. I don't want to stay. I don't like them enough. They're wrong. Something, starting to pick them apart. And then this slow pulling away. And then I'm jumping to another relationship, right? I've just seen that cycle with this type of person clinically. And so just kind of watching that manifest. And what's interesting is that the character in the book, who actually never gets named, she is devastated by finding out that the person that she was pursuing this whole time becomes unavailable, but then jumps to someone else, who then jumps to someone else, because that's how it works. That's how it works oftentimes in this configuration, is that when we live with people who aren't really available, eventually they're not going to be available for us either. So just sort of manifesting that. And also her transference, there was an interlude too, where when she realizes that the person that she seems to want isn't available, but somebody else had them, and she's sort of the closest she can get to him is through this intermediary character. And that woman tells her all about having this guy. Initially, she's kind of like grossed out by this woman. But once she finds out that this woman has had him, she wants everything. She wants everything to do with her. She wants every detail of their affair. Even though it was long ago, even though it was, a different time and a different place, she wants to know about the affair. She wants to, and she ends up wanting it and sleeping with this woman. She wants to sort of consume her by proxy, right? She wants to sleep with her to sleep with him, because that's the closest she can get to him. And it's not really because she has any interest in her, but she wants to get to him. And that's not attachment. That's not real caring. That's not real interest. but that's her trying to get access. And it's like sort of a temporary obsession, I will say, that pushes her aside, and in her thinking brain kind of moving through what really is her goal here, and what really is going to leave her feeling satisfied with connection. And instead she's getting off in a really primal way. I mean, the sex is, pretty compelling. It's a very primal way of releasing all the buildup that she's had because she's wanted him so badly. And then to find out, A, she can't have him, and B, this other woman has had him over and over again years ago. So the only way she can get him is through her. I mean, it's kind of brilliant. And again, she has her, and then there's like a discarding element. So it's pretty raw. It's well written. It's very well written. And I really loved how she sort of, walked you through the way that she wanted to feel connected and important and seen. And I won't even say loved, because I don't know if she knows what it feels like to feel loved. I think she maybe loves her child, but I don't think she really knows what it feels like to feel loved. She's kind of I think she's too narcissistic to feel love, really. I think she's too self-consumed. I don't know that she probably the closest that she feels to love is for her friend, her best friend. But she goes in and out of having a lot of perspective or real genuine affection for other. But it's a very compelling book. I really, really enjoyed it. And I think that it's one of the more raw, personal stories of women that I have read in a long time. And getting back to the comment that my friend made about it being about menopause, I think where it's about menopause, first of all, it talks a lot about the symptoms that we experience, which do interrelate with this age and with sex, right? Some of the dryness, the irritability, the hot flashes, the night sweats, the weight gain, all of that stuff, going to the doctor and kind of the feeling irrelevant, feeling like our sex life's going to go off a cliff, like all of that stuff. Yes. All of that, all those messages get communicated to us. And some of those symptoms are likely to be experienced between 45 and 55. Not necessarily like ironclad true, but they get communicated to us. And so as women in that age range, we're like, wait, what? Is it over? So her walking through that narrative and having the doctor be so cavalier about it is part of the mix. And she and her friend are looking at charts of hormones and saying, wait, what? Why didn't anybody tell me about this? I think that's true. I had that exact experience. Me and my friends right now are looking at everything going, why didn't anybody tell us this was going to happen? And is it over? And what's happening? And we're comparing our meds, and we're comparing our symptoms, and we're comparing our expectations. That is absolutely happening. So I do applaud her for bringing that to the forefront. And I think that's relevant. I do also, the perimenopause piece of it is also just looking at, we see older men with younger women all the time, but we don't see older women with younger women or older women with younger men. Certainly, we just don't see that. And so the idea that initially, she kind of feels really good about it, and then she realizes that he's a fan, and that sort of negates it. And just that head trip that it does for her. And as a culture, we don't give women a lot of permission to be in that role and to be sex symbols and to have power in that way. Sort of that conversation that she's having with herself, with that older woman that she ends up sleeping with the guy that she's, the younger guy that she's back and forth with. It's all very interesting. And I think it's very accurate. I think it's really compelling and accurate. So I appreciate the author's navigation of all of that. So all in all, I think it was a really good read. I think this book is going to do very well. So if you're looking for a book to read, I'd say check it out. And if you have any recommendations, please shoot them over. If they have to do with sex or relationships or couples, I would love to know about them. So send them on over. Okay. Thanks so much. Hey, it's Dr. Jenn. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please leave us a review and leave a comment if something struck you. We'd love to get the feedback. It really helps the podcast. And if you want to reach me, go ahead and direct message me on Instagram, or you can reach me at jen@rivieratherapy.com. Thanks.